Okay, let's go.
You know that feeling, right? You open up the charts, your heart's kind of pounding, you're full of hope. You're thinking, maybe today's the day. Maybe this is the trade. And then, bam, a loss hits. And that awful sinking feeling in your stomach comes back and you start questioning everything all over again. If that sounds familiar, well, you're not alone. We've all been there.
So let's just rip the Band-Aid off and ask the big question. Why do so many traders, some stats say up to 95%, lose money and just quit? That's a brutal number. But here's the secret. It's almost never about their strategy. It's not about the indicators. The real killer isn't the market itself. It's the chaos happening between their own ears. The real battle is always with your own mind.
And this slide, man, it just nails the two sides of that battle. You've got the emotional trader who's being yanked around by fear, hope, and ego. And then you have the professional who's guided by three simple things: their process, probability, and discipline. The legendary book, Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas, is kind of like a mirror that forces you to see which one you are. We're going to dive into his 15 core rules that are basically a roadmap to get from one side to the other.
So here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 4 stages. First, we have to accept what the market actually is. Then we turn inward and master our inner game. After that, we get practical and build a bulletproof process. And finally, we'll talk about that almost mythical state, the zone. Each rule builds on the last, kind of like links in a chain, creating a mindset that's just unbreakable.
All right, let's jump into stage 1, accepting market reality. I mean, it's simple, right? If you don't even understand the rules of the game you're playing, you're not trading. You're just gambling.
The entire foundation of a professional mindset rests on these 3 truths. First, and this is huge, anything can happen. A sure thing can evaporate in seconds. Think about those crazy black swan events. Nobody saw them coming. The market is just a giant crowd of people, and crowds are driven by emotion, not logic. Second, you don't need a crystal ball to be profitable. And third, even if a setup looks exactly like one that made you money last week, this moment is completely unique. So you have to let go of predicting and start thinking in probabilities.
And that just leads perfectly into this quote from Douglas himself. This is such a critical mental shift. See, your job isn't to be right. Your job is to consistently follow your rules every single time. That's it. That's the only part of this whole game you can actually control.
This next slide really just drives that point home. You can almost hear the 2 different voices, right? The gambler's mind is screaming, "This is a sure thing." It's looking for that hit of certainty. But the professional trader, they're thinking, okay, this setup has about a 60% chance of working out, and if it doesn't, my stop loss is right here. When you move from needing certainty to just accepting probability, you free yourself from that emotional roller coaster. So once you truly accept how the market works, the focus has to turn inward. And that brings us to stage 2, mastering your inner game. This is where the real work, and I mean the hard work, begins. Because in trading, you are, without a doubt, your own worst enemy.
So how do you actually win that inner war? Well, Douglas gives us a practical method to start reprogramming our minds. See, our brains are wired to protect us from saber-toothed tigers, not for taking financial risks. So when an old emotion like fear or greed pops up, the first step is just to identify it, name it. Then the most important part, you pause. You create a space before you react. And finally, you deliberately refocus your attention away from that feeling and back onto your system, right here, right now.
This idea right here is probably one of the most powerful mindset shifts in all of trading. When your stop loss gets hit, it is not a personal failure. The market is not out to get you. It's just feedback. It is a calculated, expected cost of doing business. The second you start seeing a loss as just data instead of a defeat, it loses all of its emotional power over you.
And that shift leads to a totally different kind of confidence. It's not hope, it's not wishful thinking that this one trade will work. It's the deep, unshakable belief that no matter what happens on this trade, win, lose, whatever, you're going to be okay. Because you're just going to follow your process. Seriously, think about it. Where does your confidence come from? From one trade or from trusting your process over hundreds of them?
Which brings us to the big one, the ego. If you're trading to prove you're smart or to brag about being right, you're not trading the market, you're fighting your own ego. And that need to be right is the single biggest roadblock to clear thinking. It's the biggest thing that will keep you from ever reaching the zone.
Okay,
So we've accepted reality, we've started working on our inner game, now it's time for stage 3, building a bulletproof process. This is where we stop just thinking and start doing. This is how we go from random luck to consistent results.
Let's be real for a second. That strong feeling you have about a trade, it is completely irrelevant. What matters is if you have a statistically tested edge, a system that you know over a large number of trades makes more than it loses. When you have a proven edge, you don't need to be right on any one trade to make money over time. So what's the glue that holds us all together? Discipline, but not the kind of discipline you're thinking of. It's an unbreakable promise you make to yourself. A promise that you will follow your own rules no matter how terrified you feel, no matter how greedy you get, no matter how loud all the noise from the market and social media gets. See, real trading discipline isn't about controlling the market. It's about controlling yourself. This is a really subtle but absolutely critical distinction. When you try to control the outcome of a trade, when you're white-knuckling it, you're basically acting out of fear. And that just leads to mistakes. But when you learn to trust your process, to trust your edge, you can kind of step back and just let the system do its job. That trust is what makes execution feel effortless.
I love this slide because it's the perfect way to think about it. Amateurs show up and they demand profits from the market. They need to make money today. A professional, they just watch, they observe, and they simply respond when and only when their system gives them a green light. They don't force a thing, they just flow with whatever the market is giving them. And when you finally combine an accurate view of the market, a mastered inner game, and a process you trust, well, that's when you unlock the final stage. Welcome to stage 4, entering the zone. This is that peak state we're all chasing, a state of pure, effortless execution.
So, what is the zone, really? It's not some kind of magic. It's a psychological state of flow, where your mind is just completely clear. There's no fear pulling you back, no greed pushing you forward, no second guessing. Your clarity is at 100%, and the emotional static is at 0. You're not struggling with yourself anymore. You're just executing your plan.
And what's the final key that unlocks this state? The final rule? Rule 15. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, it's consistency. It is the raw discipline to do the same thing with the same mindset over and over and over again. It might sound boring, but I promise you, consistency is the true superpower in this game.
Just let this one sink in for a second. You could have the single best, most profitable trading system in the entire world, and it would be completely, utterly useless if you can't apply it with unshakable consistency. That makes consistency the ultimate rule. It's the one that ties everything else together. Without it, none of this works.
So let's just end by coming full circle and repeating the core mantra of this whole philosophy. Maybe even say it with me. You don't need to know what will happen next to make money. Free yourself from that burden. Stop trying to predict and just focus on executing.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. Take a really hard, honest look at your trading. Are your biggest struggles really coming from the price chart? Or is the real battle, the one that truly decides if you win or lose, being fought inside your own head? The answer to that question, it changes everything.